Welcome back to Around the Table with Stacy Smith as we take a look at the political scene. We're staying on the national scene for a moment. Donald Trump is still riding high in the polls, as we've said, for the GOP nomination. Joe Biden has a huge lead over any challengers on the Democratic side, and it appears that officials in the president's party want to keep it that way. Even though New Hampshire has always been the first in the nation primary state, the National Democratic Party has decided that South Carolina will now hold the first Democratic primary next year. That is a state, of course, that propelled Joe Biden into the presidency. Now the Democratic Party in Florida has declared that President Biden, the winner of the primary in that state, without a vote being cast and without holding a primary and refusing to allow anyone else on the ballot. Jim, as a former state party chairman of Pennsylvania here, what do you think about these maneuverings?
Well, the maneuverings are about each individual state trying to get up to the front of the line. I mean, we've seen some debate here in Pennsylvania about trying to move our primary up. That conversation is happening right now. We're looking at dates next year that appear to be further up on the calendar than they have been in the past. We have seen, it's a business decision. We have seen what happens when a state is up towards the front of the line as the votes are being counted and there is no clear-cut winner. Usually by the time we get to Pennsylvania, it's over. So that's why we're doing it here. That's the same dynamic you're seeing right now in New Hampshire and in Florida. But what these states, whether it's Florida or another state, what these state parties need to be very, very careful about. And if I were speaking to the current chair of Florida, this is what I would advise is you've got to really be careful about the perception that you are creating of backroom deals, of a fix. I mean, you're playing right into Donald Trump's hands, who always says, hey, it's been a rigged election, even though that's not true. But doesn't this type of maneuvering risk support of that narrative? You have to be very, very careful when you do something like this because of the pushback. So I would caution Florida on this path they're on. If you're going to do this, you better get ahead of that narrative better than you have so far. Define it, explain it, be transparent about it, and then proceed to continue to control it. That's the slippery slope that Florida's on, and I would caution other states to be very, very careful about going down that path unless you're very clear and definitive about what you're doing and why.
I can't agree with you more, Jim. I mean, I think that would be actually the point I would make. It's back to the lack of understanding of civics with the American people. And whether they know it or not, parties don't have to hold any primaries. They could pick candidates in a hotel in every state if they want. But they don't see it as that. Since 1960, largely a primary process has occurred to choose nominees. And they actually think that's part of our laws, our Constitution. It's part of none of that. But that doesn't mean they don't think that. And if they feel like they're being manipulated, if Democrats think the DNC is trying to manipulate them, it could end badly. Because I couldn't agree with you more. They don't want backroom politics. They want sunshine and transparency in these days, and they're not going to get it with those type of maneuvers.
What happened in the summer of 2016 with Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton and the Donna Brazils and the Debbie Wasserman Schultz of the world, look at the outrage at the party establishment for what was a perception of backroom dealing. You're putting it on steroids here if you're not careful. Absolutely.
Right.
All I can see right now when I see that is a back room with people sitting around a big table smoking cigars.
Well, we've all been in those smoke-filled rooms.
I don't know what you're talking about.
But oftentimes, you know, they came out with a better slate. I mean, that's the problem.
But I can't believe that the Democratic Party in Florida is telling their Democrats, we're not going to give you the choice of who you want to run as your presidential candidate, even though there's no opponent at that point in time. We're going to decide for you. Boy, that's a lot of fodder for somebody to run against down the road.
Stacy, the four of us are completely against backroom deals unless we're in the back room.
Unless you're in the back room. And somebody has to supply the cigars.
And then we're okay with it.
And somebody has to come up with the cigars as well.
Are we a musical band, the Backroom Boys?
The Backroom Boys.
Backroom Boys.
No.
That could be a good one. I don't know. I guess I would throw this out to Jim and to Joe, I guess to all of you. And to Keith's point, who brought up about the backroom stuff, and Jim did originally as well. There is a lot of talk that Donald Trump is a threat to democracy. people can perceive this also as a threat to democracy, even though, as Keith points out, that, state parties don't have to hold primaries.
They don't. And that's back to my point initially when you raised this question. You have to be very, very careful to create a narrative or a perception. And just to look back to 2016 to see the result of that perception. And now look to Florida. And again, I caution Florida or any other state about the path they choose to take. And to be very, very careful about the narrative. And as Keith said, based on the crisis in civics right now and how things, there needs to be a better understanding of how it works, but there isn't right now. So it allows folks to create a false narrative and contrary to the intent of people that are doing these things. But back to the point about backroom deals, if people are coming out of a back room and saying, these are our recommendations, do what you want, we respect your decision, but this is what we recommend, versus because we said so. That's a variance there. And the days of those back rooms when David Lawrence could come out and say, because I said so, because you all have jobs through the state or for the county, those days are gone. So because I said so,
the difference is when we had political bosses, David L. Lawrence, for instance, the smoke-filled rooms actually worked because we had leaders with a conscience, with a desire to give everybody a seat at the table simply because it was good politics. They were smart enough and strong enough to ensure that everyone had a seat at the table and build their political base that way. We just don't have bossism anymore. And as a result, these faux bosses, they just don't have what it takes. It doesn't work.
We have to take a break, but Joe, you're not saying let's go back to smoke-filled rooms, are you?
If I can get a David O. Lawrence, I'd go back.
Okay, we need to take a break. We'll be back in just a moment.